a lot of folks view RevOps as system admins, and this is somewhat our own fault. I think a lot of people have just defaulted to functioning as a system admin, handling bugs, handling tickets, playing around with the latest and greatest tools, and forgetting about how to drive real revenue impact. And I think that's something that I really throughout my career have tried to press back against is how do I make sure that the work that I'm doing is having a true and real revenue impact?
Welcome to Revenue Insights. We're joined by revenue leaders from some of the highest growth companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys they've been on, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by Ebsta. We're an AI-first revenue intelligence platform designed to help you close more deals, retain more customers, and forecast better. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to the Revenue Insights podcast. My name's Adam Roberts. I run the commercial team here at Ebsta. I'm standing in for our long-standing host, Guy Rubin, today. We're absolutely delighted to welcome Dieter Heren. Dieter's a tenured executive in the B2B technology space. Really excited to dive into listen to what Dieter has to say today. Dieter, there's no one better to give an introduction to you than you. So let me start by handing the mic over. Perhaps you could tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your career and your experience.
Yeah, great to be here, Adam. Appreciate the conversation. But I am Dieter, as mentioned. I'm Vice President of Sales for a company called Popl. A little bit of a unique background compared to most VP of sales. So I actually come from a revenue operations background, have started at a company called Here.com that actually really gave me a lot of insights into the revenue operations world. Got to go through a bit of a management training type program there where I got to see a lot of the different areas of the business, which I think really helped set me up for success and eventually led me to where I'm at today, which is, leading the sales team. They were, I think, great about pushing me to really lead a little bit with actually taking on a management position within a sales team there, getting on the phones myself, working within the accounting team, within our partnership success team. And so that really laid the foundation for me. But I think what really caught my attention there was the revenue operations world, just given how much impact across the overall business it had. And so spent the past few years in a few different revenue operations roles, spent a little bit of time doing some revenue operations consulting, and then joined Popl actually to do revenue operations. And there was a gap where I think there was a need for a sales leader to come in, and it was something I started doing kind of just on the side as part of my day-to-day with revenue operations, and eventually it turned into a full-time role. So a bit of a unique background in the sales world, but excited to dive a little bit more into that.
Yeah, really interesting story. One of the big topics, one of the big themes that we are having conversations about all the time is how the revenue leader, that CRO, that VP sales is really almost becoming an architect. They're building systems. And I imagine that you've got a ton of experience in that from your RevOps space. How are you approaching that VP, that straight sales leader role with your background in revenue operations?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more of a learning curve than I expected. I think most revenue operations professionals, they see the sales leader, they see the CS leader, whatever it is, and they kind of say, oh, like I could step in and do that better from day one. And I think there's a bit of a learning curve where it hits you in the mouth a bit. But I think revenue operations definitely gave me a unique advantage and a unique perspective, I think, compared to a lot of people that step into the role. And so I think one of the really great things about revenue operations is how cross-functional it is and how much visibility you get into the entire revenue funnel versus coming in from a purely sales perspective where you're seeing really just one component of the overall funnel. And so I think that broad, really cross-functional perspective allows me to, I think, take the bigger picture view and dive a little bit deeper into areas that I think are often overlooked, especially coming from more of a data-driven background. I love data, and my first response to issues is usually to go dive into it and figure out where we're falling short. And so I think it's a great approach to really identify areas of your revenue funnel that are often overlooked and are often problematic. And so one of the things I see a lot of times is, handoff points are typically where companies are super weak. And I think that's a lot of areas where they're just overlooked. And I think coming at it from that perspective of being data driven and really diving into those sorts of things allows you to catch stuff like that would often go overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely. We a data-driven business. I'm sure you're familiar with our benchmark report that we've done for the last 2 or 3 years. It's really important for businesses to really have a complete understanding of their data, and if they don't, they tend to be leaving revenue on the table in some way or other. One of the interesting things you mentioned there was, I think you said there was a few things that if you, as you kind of took on that sales role specifically, that you might get caught off guard or they might punch you in the mouth, I think was the phrase you gave. Perhaps you could share a few stories about those things that did perhaps catch you off guard, and what you did to maybe address those.
I think the biggest difference that you see with the revenue operations, you're really kind of diagnosing and living a little bit outside of the system, whereas running the sales team, you're really living in that system day to day. And so
Yeah,
I think by default, my first instinct really was to come in and architect something and then say, okay, here's the solution, here you go. And historically, it's, you pass it off to the VP of sales, you pass it off to the CRO, whoever, and they take it and run with it. And then magically, all of a sudden, the whole team understands what's going on and everything runs smoothly. And so, really stepping into this role, all of a sudden now I'm architecting the solution, but then also have to really roll that out to the entire team. And I think that's
yeah,
something that is not a day-to-day occurrence for a lot of people in some sort of operational role where they have to really roll these things out, but then also deal with the impact of that. I think a lot of times it's easy to overlook that, hey, if we're going to spend the time to actually deploy something, like that's taking away from time that's spent on coaching or spent on working on your pipeline or closing deals. And so really understanding what that impact will be and deciding if it's actually worth it. I think easy to take a stance from the RevOps side and say, hey, there's this problem that needs to be fixed
yeah,
absolutely ASAP today. But when you really are in the system, you see, hey, yeah, I hear you that is a problem. Maybe not as big of a problem as these 12 other things that are going on. And so just really trying to find that balance of how much time and how much effort are you spending on architecting the system and really trying to do
yeah,
change management with the organization as a whole, while also making sure that the business continue to function and actually run on a day-to-day level. And so that I think was one of the biggest challenges and kind of surprises when I first stepped in there, especially just
yeah.
having to come in and actually, really lead the organization in that direction and say, hey, you know, I get that this is a problem, but we're actually not going to do that. And that kind of eats away at you a little bit from the revenue operations side, where historically you would dive into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I come from that straight sales leader background and trying to manage the two, right? Like taking the system and the importance of building the right system and the data-driven system for your business, but trying to, scale that and roll that out across what essentially are we're human beings. Everyone's got their own tendencies, their own biases, their own skill sets, their own way of working. And trying to blend those two is actually as art as it is as much science. It's definitely not an easy thing to do. Certainly not, what we would say over here in the UK, it's good on paper, but not as good on grass, right? Like, so your team sheet looks great, but when you're actually in the field and you're dealing with humans and people and myriad of things that could go wrong, it can present a challenge. So really interesting insight. One of the things that top of mind and on everybody's tongue at the moment is AI and the advent of agentic and people having access to more and more data, being more and more efficient. How do you think that has changed your view of that VP sales role? And how do you think about building AI into your systems as your
Yeah, I think what we're really seeing is the VP of sales role is becoming inherently more and more technical. It's not enough anymore to be the guy who has the cell phone and can just go show up and knock on somebody's door and you just happen to be a great closer. Like you really need to be able to understand how technology impacts your business and really understand how to drive efficiency through technology. And I think the people who aren't doing that are getting left behind. I think we saw that shift start to happen maybe 10 years ago when you started to see some of these tools like Outreach and Sendoso and all of these things that were really driving efficiency. But I think that's just accelerated with the advent of AI. Now, tools are changing on a monthly basis. What was possible or what was impossible a year ago is now standard. And so if you can't keep up with that level of change and understand that level of technological impact, it's going to be really difficult to stay ahead of the curve and make sure that your team is performing better than your competitors or performing better than the overall average across the marketplace. And so I think really to be a great VP, and I think again, one of the things that RevOps really, I think, provides an advantage of is understanding those technical systems and understanding how they tie into a business and how to drive efficiency through it. And so I think a lot to learn from the RevOps side of, how VP of sales and how sales leaders are operating that I think RevOps folks can take to heart. But I think what you'll see is more and more of people from revenue operations will start moving into more sales leader, CS leader type roles where they have that experience and can actually deploy that throughout the organization.
Yeah, and like efficiency is absolutely the number one you kind of use case for AI at the precise moment, right? Like if you can leverage automation to point your people in the right direction to save a bunch of admin time, if you can, can standardize, things like information capture and drive consistency across qualification at scale, it's very easy to make efficiency gains. We're seeing that organizations are able to do the same revenue with about 30% less headcount at this precise moment in time. What are some of the kind of tactical deployments of AI that you're using at Popl?
I think just to circle back on that point, I think efficiency really is the name of the game now. I think we've shifted from this era of growth at all costs. Let's just pour VC money and just spend $10 to make a dollar. And I think that era is now on its way out. And so the predictable revenue era, I think, is not going to be the playbook going forward. And I think teams that don't adapt to this new efficient growth era are going to be in a lot of trouble. And so I think what you'll see is there's almost like two different types of AI that you'll see. I think the first is something that really helps you drive that efficiency, like at Ebsta, for example, where you're really going to get insights into your revenue funnel. You're going to be able to drive better conversion rates with those tools and spend less headcount on actually getting that. No more do you need a team of 10 RevOps folks trying to dive into all this data and sort it all out
Yeah,
because a tool like that can do it for you. And I think paradoxically, the other side of AI that you'll see that'll actually drive a lot of change is AI outbound type tools. It's something that we tried at Popl and we thought, hey, first order effect is going to be this is going to make us so much more efficient, right? Like we don't have to spend the time crafting the emails; they'll do it for
yeah,
us. We don't have to generate the list; they'll do it for us. We can blast out all these emails; they'll do it for us. And I think what we didn't realize and kind of came to learn is that great that we do this. And maybe
yeah,
as an early adopter, you do get a little bit of an efficiency gain there. But the second order effect is okay, great. Now everybody's adopted this tool. Everybody's blasting these emails out.
yeah,
It's basically just pure noise. And so even if you're the odd exception who's crafting the most beautiful, wonderfully researched email, no one's ever even going to see it
no,
because there's too much noise. And I think we've seen, again, kind of going back to that over the past 10 years or so, these efficiency tools, especially around outbound outreach, have been driving efficiency down, actually, kind of
yeah,
paradoxically, right? Like you would expect that, great, it's going to make my team more efficient. But because it's been adopted by absolutely everybody, it's generating so much noise that it's impossible to stand out anymore. And so, that's actually been one of the big kind of game changers from Popple's perspective is really this shift to in-person marketing. And I think that's something that you'll really see as a broad trend over the next year or two here is more and more teams moving to channels where they can actually build trust
yeah.
versus these historical channels over the last 10, 20 years that were really digital first. But I think AI is going to break a lot of that where you're not going to be able to generate the efficiency anymore because everybody's doing it. I think you'll see shifts from where Google's now just automatically generating responses. So, hey, how do we stand out with SEO now? It's a great question, right? How are paid ads going to stand out? That's
Yeah.
another great question. Whereas, a lot of our success has come from really going out in person and having great conversations with people and really building trust that way. And so I think that's something where we've adopted AI at Popl to really drive efficiency with our headcount, but also have somewhat abandoned AI in a sense to move into more in-person, more trust-based interactions, especially with our outbound pipeline generation.
Couldn't agree more with what you said there. Like in a world which is becoming more and more digital, people are craving human, and anything that you can do to give yourself an advantage and actually build that level of trust. Trust is been eroded for the last 20 years with the advent of just things like social media, the internet. Having face-to-face relationships is really important, and it's something that I absolutely agree is going to be the most impactful way of building pipeline over the next decade for sure. The thing you said there about efficiency as well, like the thing that we see in the market is what AI is great at doing is really aggregating signals. The old model was to have 10 BDRs covering 100 accounts each, that because your town was 1,000 companies, let's say. But if really only 10 to 15% of those are going to be in market at any given point, why are you paying the 8 BDRs to service 10 or 15% of your TAM? Really what the game is to identify which ones are in market through having great marketing strategy, through events, through identifying signals on LinkedIn, and then making sure that your 2 BDRs have access to all those signals and the right intent data, so that they can make sure that we're finding the right people at the right time. And I think like a combination of those things is what's going to serve this era of profitable, efficient growth.
I think it's a really great take there. I think what you see is that's what the smart teams are doing, right? Like
Yeah.
they're really focusing on what are the high signal environments that we can get in, and how do we leverage our tools to really maximize our efficiency and our overall approach. And I think that's where teams get confused about what efficiency really is. Efficiency isn't blasting out 10,000 emails a day. Great, it's efficient that you've sent out those emails. You didn't have to spend as much time, but it's a very inefficient use of your actual time that you're spending. And it's just an inefficient message that's being sent out versus I think these smart teams in this era of efficient growth are really doubling down on how do we leverage the tools to put the right people in front of the right customer at the right time. And exactly to your point, really being able to identify those signals and then using this sort of all-bound approach where you have digital, you have events, you have conferences, you have all of these different approaches. But what's important is that you're talking to the right people at the right time in the right format.
We'll return to the episode in a moment. This podcast is brought to you by Ebsta. We are the only revenue intelligence platform with 3 brand guarantees. We guarantee to improve seller performance in the first 6 months. We guarantee to increase forecast accuracy to plus or minus 10% inside 6 months, and we guarantee to get you live within 30 days so you can influence this quarter's number. For more information, visit ebsta.com. Now, back to revenue insights.
Absolutely. So it's interesting you talk about you said they're the right people in the right place. Like the Ebsta benchmark report in 2025 shows that there's this huge delta in the market between top and bottom performers, like almost 11x in terms of velocity. In many cases, only 1 in 5 reps hitting quota. How do you think about using AI to level up your B and your C sellers, and what are the things that you think about when you're evaluating a team?
I think really spot on. Across the board, you're seeing this almost like barbell shift where you have really, really high performers and you have people who are just really struggling to adapt. And I think as a sales leader, that's actually a really challenging thing to tackle. And I think one of the most powerful approaches that you can do is, I think here is great use of AI, right? I, as a sales leader, can't go in and just listen to thousands of calls all day long, every day, as much as I would love to really go out and identify that. And so, how do I get more efficient with my time? How do I identify the right things that are going to have the most impact? And I think using the right tools to really go in and identify what can we do to better improve both as an individual that's struggling, but then also like what are the trends that are impacting our team where we're really struggling to actually move the ball forward in getting sales closed. I think typically what you'll see with these high performers is that they are inherently abnormal. They do something different than the rest of the team, right? That's what makes them high performers. And so how do we identify what those things that they're doing differently are? What are those positive abnormalities, and then what are the negative abnormalities that our low performers are doing? And so really being able to leverage AI tools and really being able to aggregate all of that data and turn it into real insights that we can then share with the team is, I think, a really powerful method of really bringing up some of those low performers. And so I think that's where you can really combine some of the AI benefits that you'll get while also still keeping it human and still keeping it focused on that personal touch that you get where you are doing the coaching and you are having those one-on-one sessions and really working with people to develop them.
No, I think that's right. I think AI is brilliant at understanding data points and giving you insight through data. But one of the big things that we see from the benchmark report is that there's still a skill gap. There's still deficiencies in qualification. People, your B and C sellers aren't able to drive deals forward. They're not able to multi-thread effectively across, complex stakeholder landscapes. And it's really about kind of using the data, but still trying to make sure that you're driving that human behavior that is having the biggest impact on that, I think.
And I think having a tool that they can really leverage, right? Like great if I can coach, but I can't sit next to every single seller that's struggling
Yeah.
24 hours a day while they're there. And so having those sorts of tools where they can almost self-manage and identify, like you mentioned, hey, we're really struggling to qualify correctly. Great. I can go back and review my calls and say, hey, did I qualify that deal correctly? Or hey, I have a deal that's in the works. Is this thing at risk? And I don't have to rely on my sales leader to come in and tell me that, yeah, this is a problem. I can actually go in and start to learn some of those things for myself. And so I think having the right tools in place where not only is it identifying things for leadership, but also for the actual people on the ground and helping them with that efficiency can help close the gap there. But it is a big problem, I think, that is facing a lot of organizations.
Absolutely. What are some of the tips that you could perhaps give our audience that they could take away in terms of that coaching and training and rep development?
I think approaching it from a place of empathy, I think there's always a reason that people are doing something. And I think it's easy to forget that. And I think really being able to identify what the logic is that's compelling their particular behavior, because they're doing it for a reason. And I think if we can identify what that reason is, it allows you to really get to the root of what the issue is and then help course correct that behavior. And so really easy to come in and say, hey, Adam, you're doing this wrong. This is really screwed up. You got to do it this way going forward. And that'll work to an extent, but unless you're really getting to the heart of the matter, and unless you're really trying to course correct that root behavior, I think you're really never going to see that long-term change. And so having those empathetic conversations and really spending the time, just like you would if you were on a sales call, doing the discovery almost with your team and really understanding where they're coming from, makes it a lot easier to help change that behavior on a long-term basis.
Really good insight, Dieter. If I can shift the conversation maybe slightly away from AI and back to more sales leadership, RevOps, what are some of the founding principles? If you had to write a LinkedIn post tomorrow, everyone has, you see a million LinkedIn posts a day, right? But if you had to write a LinkedIn post tomorrow with 3 kind of key tips for revenue leadership that you hadn't read in the last 6 months, what would those 3 tips be?
You see a lot of pieces on LinkedIn, especially just around how are you pushing the team forward and hey, AI is great. And I think a lot of really service level stuff. One of the biggest pieces that I think has a great impact that honestly coming from RevOps really taught me was how to lead without authority. Really easy to drive a team forward by saying, I'm your boss, this is what you need to do. But learning how to really motivate and how to drive your team without that compelling authority is a really powerful tool. And I think getting people aligned on what the goals are and getting people to really be motivated to actually achieve those as a team overall, it's a really underrated way to drive efficiency. It's a little old school, I think, but it's something that is a really powerful tool that I really try to push within my own leadership style. The other big piece to really improve revenue is really working more cross-functionally. I think it's super easy to get siloed with, hey, I'm in sales. I'm focusing on my problems as a sales leader. I don't care what's happening in CS. I don't care what's happening in marketing. But I think the more that you can actually interact with the other leaders across your revenue funnel and the more that you guys can have those conversations, it's funny how impactful those people can be, despite the fact that they aren't actually in your sales department. One of the things that we do at Popl that I think have found has been really helpful is we have a growth meeting where we just get all of the leadership on a call on a regular basis and just talk about the problems that we're facing. And there's a lot of times engineering comes up and they are bringing up problems that half of it goes over my head, but we all have unique insights, and I think we all have methods that can really help solve problems. And so there's been really great insights that have come out of those meetings where problems that to me seemed really difficult or challenging to somebody else, it's like, hey, you know what? I've actually seen something really similar. Here's how you could go ahead and tackle that. So I would just really encourage, if you're listening to this, as a leader, meet with other leaders across your team more frequently. I think it's great to knowledge share like that, and there's a lot that we can learn from teams that are outside our own departments.
I absolutely couldn't agree more. It's your first team is your leadership team, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
They're your first people that you need to be aligned with them and locked in with them before you then disseminate information and workflows and processes and OKRs and things like that down through your own function of the organization. Couldn't agree more. One of the things that is on my mind around, in particular, technology stack, Ebster aside, what are some of the key trends that you're seeing in net new technology, and what are the sort of the experiments or tests that you're running at this precise moment in time across your tech stack?
Yeah, I think broadly what you're seeing is a shift away from point solutions to more overarching platforms. I think we saw a point solution that solved for every possible edge case that came up for the last 10 years. But I think what you're seeing now is people are being a lot smarter about their tech stack, and they realize that not only are there the actual costs of purchasing the tool, but there are costs to actually implementing it, there are costs to maintaining it, costs to integrating everything together. And the more that you can consolidate your tech stack into powerful platforms that really achieve your primary goals, the more successful and the more efficient overall you'll be. And so that's something that, at Popl, we've really looked to do as well as, we're constantly evaluating, do we truly need this, or is this just, tech debt that's waiting to happen? And so I think really looking to consolidate tech and really looking to use platforms that can do multiple things, and getting away from some of those point solutions is a really powerful approach.
We didn't even talk about this, but we didn't even plan this setup. But that's what Ebster's here to do as well, right? We help consolidate into one platform, and we live inside Salesforce. So one of the things that's most important on top of tech stack, point solutions, all that kind of stuff, if AI is ever going to be successful and take off and work and actually deliver on what it says it's going to do, you need an underlying data infrastructure for businesses to be able to receive the insights and have meaningful outputs from the AI. The data has to be clean, complete, and rich. And that's for me, the number one thing that businesses need to be focused on. And before they layer any kind of technology over the top that isn't just to your point, a point solution, right? If you're expecting more than just automation and maybe a bit of here's some copy and paste some text, then you need rich data, complete data in that single source of truth, probably Salesforce or HubSpot CRM, for any impact to really be felt, I think.
As a RevOps guy at heart, you are speaking my language here, Adam. I think really having the underlying data architecture is incredibly powerful. And you mentioned something about how Ebsta really just lives inside of Salesforce, which is, I think, a really underrated piece that I think a lot of platforms today aren't doing, that I think we will see a shift to in the future. The more that you're taking sellers away from the core of their day-to-day, and the more hurdles you put in place for them to actually use the tool, the harder it's going to be to capture the data that you actually need. And I think we'll start seeing more and more of that, where you'll start to have a central hub. Because if you don't, how often is it that we adopt a tool that just gets unused or is only partially used? And then great that we have the underlying data architecture, but we're not actually filling in the data points that we need. We're not able to calculate the metrics that we need. And then all of a sudden, everything kind of falls apart.
I think in the long run, like if you look at the advent, Salesforce transformed CRM, right? Had its app store to help Salesforce become even better. And platforms have not almost outgrown it, but have actually tried to shift sellers and individuals and revenue leaders away from Salesforce, platforms that because they want you to live in their platform. And in reality, as AI does transform over the next 3 to 5 years, I only see people migrating back to Salesforce. And I actually think Salesforce is the long-term winner, because you need that single source of insight, that single source of truth where all of your data lives and sits, in order for any kind of agentic insight creating AI to live. It needs all that information to be in one place.
I think it's a great point you bring up, especially around this agentic AI and AI in general, right? It needs the underlying data, and the more just disparate systems that you have, the more difficult it is to consolidate all of that. And so I think you're spot on. I think again, seeing this shift away from point solutions into platforms, and I think we'll overall see just an underlying shift into just one centralized
Yeah.
hub. And so yeah, I think an interesting trend that we'll see how
And
it takes place.
even without the AI, right? You're still trying to align people and everybody in your organization to one go-to-market process. There might be, differences between segments and geographies and territories and product types, but you're trying to align everybody to the same process. And it sucks when everyone's doing things in different tools and in different systems.
Definitely makes it far more difficult to manage.
Yeah.
So yeah, personally as a sales leader, I love it when all of my reps are just using Salesforce. All of the data's in there. It certainly makes my life a lot easier not having to manage 14 different tools.
Indeed. Look, Dita, I've had an absolute blast in this conversation. Really, really enjoyed your time. Some amazing input. One thing we do with all of our guests is we have some quick fire questions as we kind of wrap up the podcast. And if you're okay, I'd love to kind of roll through those with you now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Are you sitting comfortably?
As comfortable as I'm going to be here, Adam. Go ahead and fire away.
You're right. Okay. So what's your key prediction for the world of RevOps for 2025?
I think you'll see a shift in RevOps from systems management into strategic growth ownership.
Very good. What is the biggest trend in RevOps right now?
Other than arguing what to call RevOps every year, I think the biggest trend that we see is, again, that shift into more of a strategic understanding of how we can impact the business and going beyond just managing tools and managing systems.
What is the biggest misconception about RevOps and how do you challenge it in your role?
A lot of folks view RevOps as system admins, and this is somewhat our own fault. I think a lot of people have just defaulted to functioning as a system admin, handling bugs, handling tickets, playing around with the latest and greatest tools, and forgetting about how to drive real revenue impact. And I think that's something that I really throughout my career have tried to press back against is how do I make sure that the work that I'm doing is having a true and real revenue impact that's going to make a difference for the business versus just being a fun thing to play around with that seems interesting or cool.
What's a mistake you see companies making in their revenue operations and how do they avoid it?
I think one of the really easy ones to avoid is having revenue operations report into the wrong person. It's very common to see revenue operations roles that report into a sales leader or report into a marketing leader. And it basically just turns into sales operations or marketing operations and becomes I think, siloed, smaller version of what it could be. And I think companies that understand the power of revenue operations and understand how to use it to actually drive impact to the business will have it report into whether it's the CEO, CRO, or COO, a lot of C titles there, will really be able to generate that cross-functional impact that I think a really great revenue operations organization can deliver.
What question would you like to ask our next guest?
What is one friction point in your revenue funnel that you think most companies overlook, and how are you solving for it?
We'll make sure that we ask our next guest that very question indeed. Dita, it's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. Hopefully there's a ton of value in there for all of our users and our listeners. I've really enjoyed it. Is there anything that you would like to share finally before we say farewell and end the podcast?
Appreciate you having me on, Adam. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed our conversation today and looking forward to continuing conversations in the future.
Yeah, fantastic. It's been great to meet you, Dita. Thank you to all our listeners and tune in next time.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights from Ebsta. If you want to learn more from some of the brightest minds on how to predictably and efficiently grow revenue, then subscribe to our newsletter. We'll deliver actionable insights straight to your inbox. go to ebsta.com/newsletter. See you soon.